I am going to cook cottage pie for everyone tonight. And this, of course, is the Hedgepig hat. Hedgepig! Go ahead and clip that, honey. I know you want to. Hedgepig! Anyway, that is replacing at the moment the pink pig uh, uh, redeem because we cannot find pink pig. I suspect foul play. But in any case, so let's talk about cottage pie and shepherd's pie and what the difference there is. In America, we call shepherd's pie any sort of meat or vegetable stew that you put into a baking dish and top with mashed potatoes and then pop in the oven to finish heating it and to put a little browning on the potatoes. Uh, I did not know until I married my husband that uh, what I always thought of as primarily shepherd's pie, which is a hamburger with gravy, usually onions, peas, carrots, and then with mashed potatoes on top, that is not actually shepherd's pie. That is cottage pie. Cottage pie has its name beginnings in England, and the Irish version is shepherd's pie. And what shepherd's pie actually is mutton or lamb in the stew, basically, with gravy and peas and carrots and onions, anything really they want to put in it. And that is a shepherd's pie. Um, they also do a fish pie, which is uh, usually various different types of fish that are local to the area in a seafood stock, and it is then topped with mashed potatoes and cooked. Interestingly, they do not have a version that has chicken in it. However, here in America, we have beef and chicken and lamb. If that's actually lamb's pretty rare, and sometimes seafood, and those are all put under the blanket of shepherd's pie as a style of food rather than the actual real name of it. Um, so as I said, tonight we're going to be doing cottage pie. And for that I'm going to be using um, hamburger and a sweet onion, some nice baby carrots, some nice sweet peas, and I'm going to make a gravy with that, put some herbs in it and all, and then we will be putting that into um, a baking dish, and then I'm going to top it with the mashed potatoes that my husband made for me because his are better than mine, honestly. I will tell you how to make mashed potatoes, although what? Although I am not going to actually demonstrate how to make them. Um, you could, if you really wanted to and were pressed with time, could even use instant mashed potatoes, which is a powder, or you could also use the frozen versions that they have now. That is for you, sweetheart. But if someone really wants to save some time, I didn't say you had to eat it. If they really wanted to save some time, they could use the instant version, including the frozen ones now that I've seen in the uh, uh, frozen food department. And of course, fresh, made right here is always going to be better. But, all right, so to start out, I have got a sweet onion, which I will once more start by cutting off this little, the end that the green part, the shoots come out of. Hush, Smudge. Hush. My dog is in the background already whining because he knows Mommy's cooking. Again, first cut open, you take and look and see whether or not there's any unappetizing dark areas, which in this one there's not. Yay. And I am then going to take and peel off the basically inedible outer skin and the first layer of the onion so that I have a nice area to start with. Um, you can eat the outer peel if you want to, the onion skin, but it's kind of gaggy, honestly. It doesn't get moist, it doesn't cook up, it doesn't cook away. It just sort of hangs out there in the back of your throat making you gag. But it's not going to hurt you if you get some in there. Um, so this is just going to be a dice. You could use slices if you want. Um, but I'm going to dice it as usual, and I like to leave this end on, which is the root end, because it holds the whole onion together. And I am going to make a couple cuts along here. And while you're cooking this, the recipe will be up in my Discord after stream, but um, it is at this moment in its raw state in my head. Unfortunately, this is one of those recipes that would get lost because I never wrote it down. And when I asked Andrew's mom about it, she just sort of reeled off the ingredients and said how much, just, eyeball it. So, and that's how a lot of people cook, and that's why recipes get lost from generations, because everybody figures, well, I make it, everybody likes it, and, everybody knows what's in it. But as we found out with my grandmother's potato salad, that is not necessarily true. We knew what was in her potato salad, but what made it her potato salad was um, it was the ratio, basically. You can still have the same recipe and tell people to eyeball it and try to figure it out, basically just, oh, well, you put this in it till it looks right, you put that in it till it looks right. An onion, half an onion, something like that, to go with some ground beef, however much you have, and then you add in some carrots and peas, and it's like, well, okay, we all know what goes in it now, but how much? Because that ratio affects the flavor. And so that's why two people can make the same thing exactly next to each other with exactly the same ingredients, and they'll taste slightly different because how much of something you put in there is important, and it does have an impact on the flavor. So I'm going to finish cutting up this half of the onion, and because we like onion and we're making this with a lot of beef, we're going to be using 2.5 pounds of ground beef in this. We're going to use a whole onion. Now, this isn't as big as some onions are. Feel free to use an entire onion if you want to. Feel free to use half or leave it out completely. And for those of you who like garlic, I would suggest putting in perhaps 2 cloves of garlic in this. And I wouldn't do more than that because I think it would just overcome the flavors and just be nothing but garlic in that case. So other variations on this, and the first thing you should do obviously when you're making this is to put your potatoes on. So we've got about 8 potatoes here, and they are a large just sort of all-purpose potato, and they were cut up into a fairly large dice and then put in salted boiling water, and they are boiled for approximately 20 minutes. At which point you test the potato with a fork, and when the fork slides in easily, your potatoes are done. At that point, you drain them. And in this case, they get started being mashed. Andrew put in about half a cup of milk, 1 stick of butter. That's a whole stick of butter. And then he added in, I'm going to approximate between 1/3 and 1/2 a cup of mayonnaise. Now, to talk about the mayonnaise thing, a lot of people go, ew, mayonnaise and mashed potatoes. Well, it's just like mayonnaise is a fat source, and mashed potatoes need a fat source. Now, some people I have seen actually put uh, olive oil in their mashed potatoes. All they have is their potatoes, they boil them, then they pour oil into them and mash that up and think they're absolutely fabulous. And, um, oops, uh, that's a personal choice. For instance, when you're making a grilled cheese sandwich or any kind of grilled sandwich, you can put butter on the outside of the bread. You can put margarine on the outside of the bread, or like what I'm doing now, I put light mayonnaise, a light scraping of mayonnaise on it because it's just a fat source. That's all it needs to be, and it serves its purpose. Um, in Andrew's mashed potatoes, I always made mashed potatoes when I wasn't making them from a box because he's going to say it and he's going to rat me out. Uh, he, I would always have them traditionally the way my mother made them, and that was salt and pepper, and we didn't use white pepper. We didn't care if it showed up in the mashed potatoes. Classically, use a white pepper in it because then you don't have the appearance of the little black flecks in it, but we like the little black flecks. So, but milk, butter, potatoes, salt and pepper. That was how Mom made them. And another variation you can add in this, instead of the mayonnaise, you could add sour cream if you like sour cream in your mashed potatoes or with your potatoes. And I do. It actually adds a pretty interesting variation. Um, but in this case, we use mayonnaise, and that's how my husband makes them, and they are wonderful. They are the only mashed potatoes, short of ones that you doctor up with things like ranch dressing or um, uh, sour cream. It's the only mashed potatoes that I have ever had that you can eat them just as is. You don't have to add anything else to them. They taste wonderful just that way. I've always at least added extra butter on top or gravy or something like that. But with the mayonnaise in it, it actually makes for a very light, very nice mashed potato. It's light and fluffy. It helps actually lighten up the density of the potato. So that's actually quite nice. Um, that's a little thick. And it's, give it a try. What the heck? I have a first time viewer in chat of Maverick. That's Maverick too. He's a friend of mine. He does streaming occasionally of the game Ark. He also has done The Long Dark and Subnautica, and he's a heck of a guy. So welcome in, Tom. I appreciate you being here. And I've been just talking about cottage pie and shepherd's pie and what the difference is and how to make the mashed potatoes that Andrew made, so I didn't have to. So that was nice. And I appreciate that, honey. Now these are just baby carrots, and I've probably got, if you were to pile these into a measuring cup, you'd probably see I had maybe a half a cup of these in there. And I've already got a whole sweet onion diced. And these are Mayan sweets. They are not Walla Walla because we would have had to buy 10 pounds of Walla Wallas, and we just don't want to have that many around at a time. We like onion, but we don't go through it quite that fast. And when onions go bad, they go bad, bad. They get nasty and smelly and mushy, and they draw all kinds of little fruit flies and gnats and stuff to them, and you just don't want that. So we bought a 5-pound bag of Mayan sweets, and they're nice. So I am going to cut these in a nice round little discs, and You can buy these already in matchstick form. You can buy them in little crinkle cut slices. Um, I like the appearance of both these round discs, and I like the appearance of the matchsticks in this, because part of what you're doing when you're cooking is not only creating good tastes and smells, you also want it to be visually appealing and interesting. And so, you know, occasionally giving a different size or shape of cut is nice. Um, Now, if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to give me a question here in stream or after stream in our Discord, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I will just keep this going. And I quality tested a carrot. They're nice and sweet. It's so they can get you to multiply it, honey, so that you are stuck having to buy 4 packages of 6 and 3 packages of the hot dogs, so that you have an even number of hot dogs and buns. And you can do that and have it so that you actually have the right number, or you can just buck up and get have an uneven number and just let it haunt your days. Yes, that's why you have checkout wenches and why you have your wife make up the list, so I tell you what quantities to get. It also helps. We tend to buy these things from Costco, and so they come in like 24 packs, so that's also very handy. Now, it doesn't get much more comforting as far as food goes on a cold day than something like a... Did I swear? Did I? I don't know. It doesn't get much more comforting than to have casseroles. They're warm, they're filling, they're usually easy to put together, and don't take a heck of a lot of time, although you wouldn't know that from my last stream with the chicken tetrazzini, because that took a long time to get the chicken to cook. That was because we didn't thaw it first, it was frozen. Otherwise it would have been a lot quicker. And at its heart, a casserole is a complete meal in one pot, in one plate, and so that really does save you a lot of time. Now, I'm not going to discourage you to add a little extra nutrition to this, and when you serve it with, you know, a nice tossed salad, or an additional vegetable on the side if you'd like, something like some corn or some additional peas. You know, you could even eat it with bread on the side if you want. This recipe is one of the ones that's fairly gluten-free. It doesn't really go in with a keto diet as far as I understand it because of the mashed potatoes, but you could mash cauliflower instead, and that would work. And mashed cauliflower, a little different in texture, a little different in flavor than potatoes, but it's a good substitute if you can't eat the potato for some reason, or if you're trying to cut back on your carbs, shed a few pounds, whatever. If you need to be on the keto diet for your health, then that's an option for you there. And when I thicken the gravy, a thickener option you can use is arrowroot, and that is not a form of gluten or carbohydrate. I believe it's not a gluten. And it will also fairly efficiently thicken your gravies. So there are the classic ways of thickening your gravy is to use flour and water to make it into a gravy. Some people use cornstarch in instead, and that's an option as well. I do that in some forms of cooking, but not in most. Most of the time, if there's a gravy, I'll use flour, because one of the few things I am not is a sufferer of celiac disease, so I can have gluten. Yay! One of the few things I can have. Um, so we're doing good with that. And we're preheating the oven to 425 because everything in this is going to be already cooked. All you need to do is reheat it through and add a little bit of browning on top of the potatoes. So it's on a high heat oven. That's the 425. And that way then when you are ready for it, your oven is ready for you. So I've got my carrots and my onions, and I am now done with this cutting board for now until we take the casserole out of the oven. So I will move this aside and move the hot plate into view so that you can see the hot plate while I am cooking. And what I have got here is a lovely Farberware, and I've got to take the lid off. This is a brand new Cuisinart hard anodized deep frying pan. For instance, if you're going to be doing pan frying fried chicken, this is a good option because you can actually put an inch or so of, I'm going to actually turn this sideways so you can see it. It's actually quite a thick frying pan, and it's made for frying chicken and things like that, and for, excuse me, for making sauces in that you need to saute. Can't we just use a flamethrower? We could. Let me see. So I am going to turn this up onto about a medium to medium high. These burners are actually solid cast iron, so they heat up kind of slowly, but when they do get there, they have a very even heat and a very steady heat, unlike the coils. So that's an excellent, well, it's basically a hot plate. It's made by Farberware. You can find the links in my stream equipment section on my Discord. Honey, can you throw my Discord up there? And what you just saw me take a sip of is my drink for this stream, which is a sugar-free A&W root beer called Zero Sugar. It's pretty good, actually. I've got 2.5 pounds of hamburger here. And to that I will be adding salt, pepper, rosemary, and sage, and some parsley, because I absolutely adore parsley. And what have I got here? I am going to start out with a nice spatula. Not my spoonchula, that comes later. And I'm just going to reduce this chunk of a 10-pound roll of hamburger from our grocery store into larger chunks that will then start to be cooked down. And we will cook it all the way to done, well done, where we'd see no form of pink anymore. And some people may ask, why is it safe to eat a steak that's rare or medium rare, and why should you not eat hamburger that way? The difference is that steaks have the outer surface only that's been exposed to cutting surfaces and such at the butchers, and You can sear the outside of that and it will kill the bacteria that can cause E. coli. And you cannot do the same thing with hamburger because, first of all, it was put through a grinder, and every tiny little section of this hamburger has been exposed to that bacteria, possibly. And if you do not cook it too well done, I believe the temperature is 180 internally, um, you run the risk of getting E. coli. And I have had E. coli. It's not fun. Um, Children die of E. coli because it is that rugged of a bacteria infection, and it causes lasting damage to your um, system. So not a fun time. Try to remember to eat your hamburger as done. Hey, Silvery Frost, welcome in, welcome in. Tonight we are making cottage pie, which is the beef version of a shepherd's pie. And I have already given a rough ingredient list for the mashed potatoes, which my husband made before stream. Um, and I am now making the filling for the pie. So we're waiting for this to get up to temperature. And I am going to say that I am going to fix some of the stream schedule up when I'm feeling better. I'm still at the point, unfortunately, where I am struggling with um, feeling sick and being hurt. So I'm still working on that. I hope to get up and doing this regularly again real soon. So as it is, I've just been kind of hit and miss, and I really haven't done a regular stream schedule in almost a month. I'm hoping that I'm getting to the end of all of this so I can go back to doing that and being here 2 to 3 days a week. Um, until then, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience with me, and I'm sorry that it got in the way. But I will make up those um, recipes that I did not cook for you. One among them was a um, viewer request of chicken mushroom chowder, and that's one of my favorites. Yeah, I'm feeling better now, Mav. Um, it is a slow process, unfortunately, when my stomach gets involved. It just, me and my food allergies are just not a fun time. Um, let's see. How is everybody doing tonight? Silvery Frost, how are you doing? Have you already done your work for the day and you're off and just relaxing now? Are you going to be streaming a game later? Silvery Frost is one of the Long Dark community, and he is a streamer. If we could get him a shout out, that would be awesome. Okay, taking it in order. What is your request, Maverick? What would you like? So are you at work right now, Silvery, watching on your phone or something? But as I said, Silvery Frost is one of the Long Dark community chefs, and seems to have a lot of chefs and foodies in that particular community. I don't know how it worked out that way, it just did. There's actually more cooking talk going on in the Long Dark streams than there is in cooking streams for a lot of cases. You want me to cook lasagna, okay? I will add that in. If anybody has a request for things and they think of them off stream, you can go to my Discord and you can put that into stream requests, and I will see about working them in and trying to put them on the schedule. Yeah, lasagna is a good one. It's another recipe that who doesn't like lasagna? You know, uh, I can't imagine if you've ever tasted lasagna, you've liked lasagna. I mean, it's beef, sometimes Italian sausage, a nice tomato sauce that you've made in there, lots of seasonings, cheese, glorious, wonderful, melting, stringy, gooey cheese in a lasagna. And mine usually weigh in for a tray at about 5 pounds because I've got at least 4 pounds of uh, cheese in there because we really like our cheese. And there are actually several versions I know. I have a seafood lasagna, a vegetarian lasagna, and there's the hamburger version, and there's a chicken version I do that's made with a white sauce that's a mushroom white sauce. That one's really tasty. And yes, you really got me hooked to the long dark. Um, It is probably my favorite game. I like it even more than Ark. Those are the only two games that I actually play at the moment, and that's been fairly steady for the last year of the Long Dark and Ark. So, and you can't play, unfortunately, there's no such thing as a multiplayer Long Dark, and that is because the purpose of the game is you are the last, or are you? And in Ark, you can have your own server, you can buy your own server if you want to, and you can play with your friends. And if you are on a public server, you can play with a lot of people who are going to grief you. That just seems to be their main form of entertainment in my experience, which is why I play on a private server or um, one of the private but not dedicated servers. You can restrict who goes in, but anybody who comes in and joins you is on a tether, and that can be interesting. Um, so I'm glad to see you're up and around again, Tom. I've been rather worried with you had a bout of COVID and then a bout of pneumonia, and I was really worried about you for a while. Um, right now, unfortunately, so many people are sick. They're getting the new version of COVID. They're getting the old version of COVID. They're getting the flu. Um, there's actually been kind of a stomach flu going around. There's a lot of people that are just sick as dogs right now. So um, that's not fun for anybody. Okay, I have got this starting to work. Um, Normally, you would want to keep your pan about the size of the burner. This is a very large pan. That's not really possible, but between having the burner be a cast iron burner and having this be one of Cuisinart's hard anodized pans, it actually has a heavy disc of aluminum in the middle, and that actually makes it so when the pan heats up very evenly and tends to keep the heat. You can actually cook on a lower heat than normal. I am now going to start adding some seasoning to this. So to this we've got about 2.5 pounds of hamburger, and I am going to add that's the shaker version. I have got my industrial size thing of uh, parsley, and I am going to add probably a tablespoon and a half of parsley to this. Parsley adds a lovely flavor, it adds a pretty appearance, and in addition to that, it adds iron to your dish. So those are all good things. I am going to add the sage to this, and for this I am going to add a teaspoon of sage. So that is a piece in your, a circle in your hand that is about the size of a quarter. Just so that you know, that's approximately the measurement of a teaspoon. Try it sometime. You'll find that's accurate. And I am going to be using some crushed rosemary, assuming I can get the lid off. It's a new jar. Okay. So we have got opening up the new jar of rosemary, and this is a crushed rosemary. I am going to add a teaspoon of that as well to our dish, just sort of shaking over the top. And you can always correct the seasoning after it's cooked, but this is the only time you're going to get where the flavor of the herbs and seasonings is going to go into the food, into the meat. And so I have got a little bit of sea salt, and I have it in a grinder because they're fun. And I am adding approximately half a teaspoon of salt to this. And because you can always add more salt, you can't ever take it away. And I am going to add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. Feel free to add more pepper. My husband dislikes it, so I tend not to use very much. And that's it for the seasonings. I am going to continue to cook this around. And whether you keep this in larger pieces or smaller, that's a personal choice. There is a restaurant in the Seattle area that is run by some British expats, and they come from the Lancashire area, which is where my husband is from actually. And they have a formal eating room. They have an import shopping area where you can get seasonings and condiments, cookies. You can get your teas you love. You can get your Branston pickle. You can get all of the different special Britishness which isn't carried over here. And they also have a restaurant there called the Three Lions Pub. And in there you can taste their recipes that they brought over from England. You can get a cottage pie there. You can get steak and kidney. You can get steak and mushroom. They have a cheese curry pie. They have pork pies. And a pork pie is a very interesting thing that I'd love to be able to make for you, but it would pretty much kill me to try. It's made with sections of pieces of pork that you put in a hot water pastry, and it is a standalone. It's not made in a tin. It's not made in any kind of dish. You actually roll the thing out and it stands alone. It's a very rugged kind of pastry. And you fill it up with pieces of pork. You can use ground pork, chunks of it, like pork loin, pork shoulder, and then some people even add in bacon. And that is cooked in the oven. It has a top, but it has a big hole in the middle of it. They have a round hole in the middle because when they are done cooking, they pour a pork gelatin in there. It's a broth with a lot of collagen, and it is then you generally eat these cold. They can be warmed up too, but it is something that is very near and dear to most English people's hearts. Yeah, you have the option of grinding your own beef, being a chef. You could do that at home too if you wanted to, buy roasts and buy different cuts of meat, maybe even buy lard to put in there and come up with your grinding. And at this point now, the hamburger is most of the way cooked, so I am going to add my onions and carrots because they need to be sweated down a little bit. before you put them in the oven, because the oven cooking on this doesn't take very long. So we want to get these going too. And as I said, I don't have this recipe written down. I've got the ingredients as I put them in my head now, and I will record them down and post it in my recipe section of my Discord after stream. And you can make a cottage pie as well. So I have been doing this just at a medium to medium high heat. You could go a little hotter. You want to watch that in a non-stick pan, because you can actually scorch the non-stick part and ruin it. Not to mention, you can also burn your food and make it taste really nasty. But once you ruin your non-stick pan, it's dead. You're not going to be able to do anything else with it. So, welcome back, honey. I happen to know he went out and walked the dog to shut him up because he was singing a tune. Yes, dead. Once you scorch the inside of a non-stick pan, what happens is the non-stick lining starts to come up in little flakes, and it joins your food, and I'm not really convinced that's all that good for you. All right. So we are going to continue to cook this until the onions go translucent, at which time the carrots will be softened enough to go in the oven. And some people like to cook their vegetables and their stews and in their casseroles and stuff until they're completely soft. I like to have texture in my food, so we tend to have them a little al dente. There's still a little resistance to the teeth when you eat it, but it's definitely not raw. So, which, interestingly enough, I prefer raw carrots over cooked carrots. Cooked carrots take on a little more sweet than I actually like in the taste of a carrot. So, just like when you cook an onion, the onion becomes sweeter. You caramelize the sugars that are in it. Same thing happens with carrots. And I like them a little more on the savory side. Just a personal taste. You can eat broccoli raw, but I can't stand it when it's raw. I will eat cauliflower raw. I won't eat zucchini raw, though you can. It's a textural thing. I don't like the texture of raw zucchini. It's kind of spongy and clings to my teeth. And raw broccoli, the little broccoli ends on it with the little green things at the end of it. Just an unpleasant texture to my mouth. So I completely get it when people say things like, I love the taste of mushrooms, I can't stand to eat them, because they just have this nasty, nasty texture, and I just, ugh. So I can understand that. My niece and nephew are like that. They like the flavors, but when I was living with them when they were children, they really couldn't stand the texture of mushrooms, so they would take those out. And one of my favorite memories with my middle brother and my oldest brother's kids, I had made them beef stroganoff, steak stroganoff, taken steak and cut it up, and taken portobello mushrooms and cut them up and put that in there. And because it's in a sort of all-enveloping beef and sour cream gravy, they couldn't tell which was the mushroom and which was the beef. So I remember my nephew asking my brother, pretty much with every bite, "Is that a mushroom?" And my brother would stop and lean over, and he would look, and he would say, "No, that's a beef," or "No, that's a mushroom." and so it was separated out. And I agree completely, Mav. I completely agree. They cannot have too many mushrooms for me in a dish. And I actually have a mushroom stew that I make that is made with beef broth and multiple forms of um, mushroom, but there's no actual beef in it because it's all about the mushroom, baby. And I add mushrooms to a lot of things. I thought about adding mushrooms to this. No reason for it not to. If you like mushrooms, go ahead and add it. Um, for this amount, I would add at least 8 ounces, which is a half a pound of mushrooms. I'd be happier with a whole pound of 16 ounces, and that would just be so yum. Um, but I decided to keep this more traditional. The last ingredient other than the gravy that's going to go in here is a cup of sweet peas. And these are frozen, and these are just sweet baby peas, basically. And um, that adds the last of the vegetables. It's very traditional in English meals to have your protein, your starch, and 2 veg. So in this case, you've got your meat, you've got your hamburger, or minced beef, or beef mince as they call it in England. You have carrots and peas, and you have the mashed potato on top. So you've pretty much got your complete meal there. Now to this, I'm going to be adding basically 32 ounces of beef gravy. So that's going to be 32 ounces of broth that I am going to add in a slurry of water and flour, and turning that into a nice rich gravy, which I will season as well. When you're cooking anything, you want to add layers of flavor. You want to add salt to the water with your mashed potato. When you're cooking the potato, you want to add salt to the water because that is your chance to season that potato that's never going to come again. So you put it in salt water. When you mash it, you put in salt and pepper to taste. You add in um, any seasonings that you want other than that. Hello, Mrs. Mav. I hope you're doing well. Um, if you're going to make garlic mashed potatoes and you want to do it that way, you can add 2 or 3 whole cloves of garlic to your water when you're boiling the potatoes, and it will add the flavor of the garlic all through your potatoes. And that's the point, you want to add the garlic, not afterwards. Raw garlic is not a nice flavor. Now, as you can see here, while I've been babbling away, my pot has been doing what it's supposed to be, and it's cooking. And the onion, which I will bring up here for the camera to see a little closer, you can see the onion still has a little white, but it's also translucent. It's not that hard white that it was before it was cooked. So at the moment, I am going to turn the burner off, and I am going to get my baking pan. And this is it's just a baking tin that's made of aluminum, and got a big stack of these from Amazon, or not Amazon, from Costco that were approximately, I got 30 of them for the same price that you would get 2 or 3 in the grocery store. Seemed like a good deal to me. So because this is heavy, I'm putting 2 pans in it, and I will now take out this hamburger and the filling for this, and I will add it into here. And this is going to get heaped into one baking dish, which is a roughly 11 by probably 14, 15 inches. It's the size that they would probably call a lasagna pan or a pan for a turkey. Uh, I'm just trying to make the cleanup a little easier on my husband by using the aluminum instead of using a baking dish that he'll have to scrub the browned potato out of. So I'm going to stop using this and start using a scoop. And in this case, it's a ladle. That's fine. And I'm going to leave the fat and beef juices from cooking that are there in the bottom to add to the flavor of my gravy. Remember, fat is flavor. It does carry a lot of flavor when you have a nicely marbled piece of meat, when you have the gravy that is made with the meat juices. That's always extra tasty, much better than if you used fat-free. And this being the kind of style of cooking it is, which is basically a comfort food type style, it's going to be higher in flavor, it's going to be higher in calories, it's going to be higher in fat and carbohydrates. Basically, it's yummy. And I am going to finish getting this out. Now, some of the residual spices that I put in here on the filling are going to remain in the fat and juices, and that will help with the gravy, with the flavor of it. I like to add several tablespoons of a product from England called Bisto, and it's actually a vegan product, and it's made with soy. But it's added to, it's called gravy granules if you listen to what the actual description is. And it's made to add boiling water to, and it makes a really tasty gravy. It adds so much more depth of flavor to what you're cooking. And no, it does not have garlic in it. I always check. They make it in chicken, they make it in beef. They have Bisto that is a parsley gravy, onion gravy. They have just a wide variety, including a curry powder that they do. And it's a great product, and it really goes far in developing the flavor, adding more depth to your gravies and your soups. My friend Connor there adds it to his special chili that he makes that he calls Chili Connor Carney, which looks absolutely fabulous, and he makes it once a week in his cafe in Gloucestershire. And I cannot recommend his stream enough. He is a fabulous young chef. He is also a good friend of mine, and he's just an amazing person. So I am now going to take 32 ounces of beef broth. And as I said, I managed to find finally a maker of beef broth that does not use garlic in it. So it's giving me a little bit of ease when I'm making this. I'm going to start with 32 ounces. I'm thinking that's going to be a little dry. You know, it never hurts to have too much gravy. You can always add a little extra. So I am going to actually increase that to 64 ounces or 232 ounce boxes. Your foods, I made that warning on your stream for a reason, Connor. I always say, warning, please watch responsibly. This stream has been known to cause sudden, intense, and lasting hunger in the viewers. And so watch responsibly with a drink and a snack at hand. And boy, you look at his rotisserie chickens and all of the lovely things he does to it. His ham that he makes, that's a gammon, they call it gammon, and it's a beautiful ham that he puts a glaze on, and it just, I don't like ham, and this looks good to me. And it's just amazing what he does with this. So uh, stop by his food stream sometime. You will not regret it. I can promise you that. Alright, so I'm going to make the slurry of the flour and water, and that was 2 cups of water, and I am going to be adding in about 1.5 cups of flour, because I don't want this gravy to be loose. I want it to be nice and thick. This is my big container of flour. It's a gallon plastic container. It keeps bugs out, which is always a good thing. Now I've got that set to the side, and I am going to get out my whisk. And I have got the heat back on underneath that broth because I want the broth to be hot when I put the flour and water in here. It's got to cook the flour first of all. If you ever have a gravy and it seems thick enough but it's kind of whitish and it tastes floury, it tastes like uncooked bread, that's because the person did not cook the flour long enough. You want to make sure you do that when you're cooking your gravies. And you also want to make sure that when you add your slurry to your hot broth, you want to make sure that you are whisking the whole time, or what you're going to be making is dumplings. And not good tasting dumplings either. These will just be nasty flour blobs that are going to muck up your gravy, and you don't want that. If you do get lumps in your gravy, the best thing to do is to either try to whisk them out. If that doesn't work, use a stick blender, also called an immersion blender. That will get your lumps out fairly efficiently. Okay, so that's smooth now and waiting to go in. And to this, I am going to add, like I said, you want to layer your flavors. So everything you do, you want to season it at least a little. And I am probably adding 1/4 teaspoon of salt to this. And then I am going to add a little bit more of the rosemary. And I'm going to put that in the broth, actually, instead of in the flour. And that's about 1/4 teaspoon of rosemary. And I am going to, we're really going to have to buy more sage already. Add in an equal amount of sage, about 1/4 teaspoon. And I am going to add in another about tablespoon of parsley, because it makes the gravy taste so nice, makes the gravy look so nice. So at this point we will then want to stir this up. And I can already smell this. The basic broth already smells nice. You start adding things like seasonings into it and using a pan that has the drippings and brownings of the meat on the bottom. We're doing with the broth what's called deglazing the pan, and that means basically we're scraping up the cooked bits and adding them to the broth, which adds the flavoring to it. I am going to stir the salt in. And one of the things you can tell, when you first start with a gravy, you start with a broth like this, you put the seasonings in it, and the seasonings just float on top. As you get cooking this, as it starts to thicken, the seasonings go through the gravy, and they're not just on top anymore. So every bite is basically seasoned and pretty. As I said, as a variation, you could have put garlic in with the hamburger. You could have put garlic in with your mashed potatoes. And if you wanted to, you could even add garlic into the gravy, but I think that's really beating it with the garlic stick. And garlic is one of those herbs that even when, one of those things that even when I could eat it, you didn't want to add too much because it's so easy to overpower the flavor of the dish, especially if it's something more delicate like fish. So, yeah, pork allergy. It's one of my weirdnesses. I've always been unable to eat pork. I can like the taste of it just fine, but after I eat it, about halfway through my meal, I start tasting oil in my mouth from the pork. Could be ham, could be pork loin, could be bacon, doesn't matter. And it has a rancid taste to it in my mouth. And that's because my body is already saying, what are you doing to me? Um, when you're allergic to something, you're actually poisoning yourself. So, when I say I am allergic to garlic, it is a severe reaction to it. I get just vilely sick. And it has gotten to the point, because I didn't figure it out until I was in my mid-30s. Uh, I just kept eating pork because my family likes pork. We had pork chops, ham running out the ears, ham for sandwiches, ham for dinners. Um, when I made macaroni and cheese, I put ham in it to make it a main dish, and it was lovely and tasty. And we had bacon and we had sausage and you know um, navy bean soup with ham in it. And every time I did it, I got more and more allergic because I was basically beating my body up. And it's gotten to the point where if I touch ham with my hands and don't really seriously scrub my hands afterwards, if I touch my own food, if I touch my mouth, if I, accidentally touch my glass and it gets anywhere near where my mouth is going to be, I'm going to get just as sick as if I ate the ham. So it's why I don't handle ham anymore except with nitrile gloves on, because guess who's allergic to latex? Anyway, uh, my garlic allergy is, if possible, even worse than that because it will stop my breathing. So that's why I am so very careful about garlic and how I can get so very sick if I accidentally run across it. And most of the time that means I didn't read ingredients in something we bought from the grocery store, or I've gone to a restaurant and trust when I say no garlic, I'm allergic to it, that they'll actually make sure that my food is not cooked near garlic, doesn't have garlic in it, all that. Uh, Food allergies can be absolutely brutal. Just, I'm sure everybody's heard of like peanut allergies and having to use the EpiPens, and shellfish allergies. It's the same thing. It's just to a slightly weirder thing that I'm allergic to garlic and I'm allergic to pork. So anyway, this needs to go up a little bit higher because this needs to get hot. And I think I'm actually going to add this pretty little top to it so it does have a chance to actually reach a simmer. So I will add lasagna to my list of things. Do you care which version I make, Tom, or do you want the beef and red sauce version? Would you like to see my chicken and mushroom version? Um, I can hear my husband in there giggling. He's probably watching something else. Uh, he's in a different room from me. This is my living room I'm sitting in the middle of. And it's really the only room in the house we have that's big enough for me to cook in. And this is a 4x2 folding table that we got for me to cook on after my first nearly disastrous stream, where I was using a board that's actually on this table because it's flame proof and helps retard heat. I had that on top of a folding table, and that tray table. It's basically a TV tray. I had it on top of that, and I leaned a little bit too much into it, and I nearly dumped the whole thing over. And so if you ever watch my first stream, you'll hear me scream on it. So as it starts to go over, and I make a frantic grab. Andrew does do about 200 things at once. He is an incredibly efficient person who can pay attention to a streamer be playing a game, be surfing the internet, be being my mod, and have a movie on in the background, and he can keep up with it all. I can't do that anymore. I guess I'm just too old. Now, one important thing I did not mention, taste your food. So I'm going to taste a piece of the hamburger here. And as you can see, you can actually see the herbs that were cooked in with it. So I should be able to taste that in the hamburger. And I do. I taste the rosemary. I taste the sage. I can even taste the parsley because I'm very familiar with what parsley tastes like. And he can do all that while patting his head and rubbing his tummy. I would have given you a shout out, Maverick, as a streamer, but I know you've pretty much all but stopped streaming, which is sad because you were a good streamer. But for those of you who are watching and you ever want to see somebody play Ark Survival or The Long Dark or Subnautica uh, and some other games he's looking at, he does actually play those, and he's a very good streamer, so give him a follow. Honey, why don't you throw it up anyway? Uh, and give him a follow, and if he comes on, put your notifications on. I promise you, you'll have a good time watching. I will also mention at this time, at the top of my screen there, you will see that's up along here. I have a stream goal for stream upgrades, and it's a fairly modest one. It's only $300. We're about a third of the way through it now, and that will buy me another camera and some more of the equipment that I use here, like the camera arm and braces. It will buy me, pots and pans, and if I'm missing them, and new utensils, because they do wear out. And the money that I am given will be worked. Maybe, maybe not. Connor, you know I'm shy, and I'm not adding much to the stream whether I have my face showing or not. So I'm kind of thinking no. If we get a house with a nice kitchen, then I'll think about it. But until then, I don't really want you seeing the living room behind me and all that. So we'll get a face cam when we hit 10,000 subs. There we go. So I am going to assume that it's causing nice steam. It doesn't actually have to be boiling. I am going to start whisking in the gravy here, the flour and water to make the gravy, and I'm now going to try to very gingerly pull this towards me, and it's just not wanting to move. One more thing that's not cooperating. And as you see, I am whisking while I add it in, because when the cooler flour and water meets the warm gravy, warm broth in there, it immediately starts thickening. It starts to be cooked, and you want to make sure that you keep whisking during that so it doesn't stick to the bottom, so it doesn't turn into dumplings because that will not add anything to your gravy. So as you can see, we've already got the color changing. It went from being very white to starting to turn brown. And especially in my food, brown is flavor. I realized I cook a lot of brown food. Uh, a lot of my gravies are there. They're brown. The meat's brown. Um, I don't know how some of these celebrity chefs and such do it, so they come up with such pretty food. Mine's tasty, which uh, if I had to make a choice, I'd rather have tasty food than pretty food. Okay, Connor, you go have a good time watching your program, and hope you'll be here for the reveal at the end. And this is a plastic coated whisk, and it is safe for using. Ow! You can add a burn to that. Uh, you can add uh, this is safe to use in non-stick pans. Hi Lily, how are you doing? Welcome in today. We are making a cottage pie, which is a shepherd's pie made with hamburger instead of lamb or mutton. When you stop and think about it, it actually makes sense that a shepherd's pie would involve a shepherd, and a shepherd is one who watches sheep. And although I have to say, if you're going to be cooking up the lamb and that's what your shepherds are eating, they're probably not that great of shepherds. Uh, more involved in eating the things than watching them. Um, you just got to know there's a corgi at their feet saying, "No one will miss just one." um, I keep moving this because when you're cooking a gravy, uh, you're running the risk all the time of having it stick to the bottom. It's going to get clumpy. It's going to have lumps in it. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear life stuff is getting in the way right now, Lily. You'll work your way through it, and we've got a pretty good community going on in the cooking community that you belong to. That if you need to talk, there's always somebody willing to listen. Oh, chicken and chips night! Wow, that Connor, as I said, runs a cafe. He's the chef there, and he normally works from somewhere around 8 in the morning until about 5:30 at night. And on their chicken and chips night, his cafe serves absolutely fabulous breakfast and wonderful sandwiches and quarter whole or half chickens that they've used in their rotisserie oven, cooked in their rotisserie oven till they're absolutely golden brown and juicy and delectable. Uh, Twice a month, they say they are going to have a chicken and chips night. And in that case, he gets in there at 8 in the morning and pretty much doesn't leave until about 11 o'clock at night, sometimes later. And during that time, they serve chicken and chips, which is their wonderful hand-cut uh, chips or French fries, as we would call them in America, and half or quarter chickens along with that, and their coleslaw that they make in-house as well. And um, it's private seating, reserve in advance because they open their cafe after the normal working hours for this. And um, couple weeks back, they actually did something new, and they did, in addition to their chickens, they did some roast pork, and I understand that was fabulously successful and looked really good too. I'm hoping they're going to do lamb sometime soon. Like I said, they are in Cheltenham, England, which is a very fancy town in Gloucestershire, and they are known for uh, their horse racing. That is a regular thing there. So there's a lot of equestrian type stuff going on. I have no, I guess I do have one spoon. I have the tiniest little wooden spoon you've ever seen in your life. It came as part of a picnic set from my last employer. And I need to taste the gravy and make sure that it's seasoned correctly, and you can't taste the flour. It needs to cook a little bit longer. It's starting to get thick. I can taste the herbs in it. It does need more salt, so I'm going to add some more salt to that. And again, this is sea salt I'm adding. You can use iodized salt that we use in America. They use rock salt. Um, in England, they don't use iodized salt products. And sea salt is not iodized. Funny, I would have thought it was, but it's not. And iodine is one of those things that you need to have to stay healthy. So make sure that you get some sort of iodized product in your life. Could be iodized salt, or it could be oysters, shellfish, some various different kinds of seafood. It's very much linked with seafood. So that's why before we had good ways of getting seafood inland, a lot of people had problems with iodine, and that is why Morton Salt added iodine to their salt, although you can still get it without. When I get this done, I will be pouring this over my prepared pan of hamburger and vegetables, and then I will be spooning fluffy clouds of my husband's mashed potatoes over the top. And then we will poke it in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes to let the top brown and heat the filling back up. And then I will show you what it looks like before we start nomming. Take pictures, of course, for my Instagram and my Discord, where you will be able to see not only all of the recipes that I have cooked online, and you will see also I have all the pictures of what I have cooked online. And this is starting to look quite nice and thick, and as you can see, the herbs are no longer floating on top only. They are actually incorporated through this gravy, which is how you know it's actually gravy at this point, because it is thick enough to have the herbs go through and kind of be carried along by the flour particles that are in this that make it nice and thick. And so it makes a very complex type sauce that you add to this. Now, like most things that you cook by hand, um, the flavors will need to marry, and what that means is the herbs, the seasonings, all of that, the flavors of the meat and vegetables will actually increase overnight. If you let this sit for a day, or if you have the leftovers tomorrow, this will be more flavorful tomorrow than it is tonight, and it's pretty darn nice tonight. Okay, now I am going to turn off the heat underneath this, and use a bigger spoon to taste what the gravy tastes like now. That's perfect. It is just salty enough that you don't think it needs to add salt. It is now carrying the flavor of a beef gravy instead of having any kind of floury taste in the background. And you can taste the herbs in it, and it's quite nice. So, I am now going to take this and get my baking dish and going to start ladling the gravy over the top. And another traditional way to serve this is when you actually serve it, have extra gravy in a gravy boat or gravy dish, and add extra gravy on the side or over the top of your serving of cottage pie, um, which is certainly a yummy way to do it. And some cottage pies that people make are really skimpy on the gravy, so they're actually more like a sloppy Joe in consistency. They don't have the gravy mixed in. They don't have it incorporated all the way through, and with any excess they just moisten the filling and say it's good enough. I like to have it so that it is more like a beef stew, very thick beef stew, but that you've got a lot of gravy in there too to keep it nice and moist. Dry pies are the worst, and this is not going to be a dry pie. I've probably used half of the gravy that I made. It won't go to waste. We will use it for making leftovers, or next time we have leftover roast beef, I can thaw the gravy if I've frozen it, and we can make hot roast beef sandwiches. Or, if I've got mashed potatoes that are just sort of begging, have nothing else to do, I can get this gravy and put the gravy on the mashed potatoes and have a nice nami treat. Okay, so you can see basically what this the gravy to filling ratio is in this. And let me get the onion off of it. I will lift it up so you can see. As you can see, it's quite wet, and that's what you want it to be. And now I am going to bring over the miracle that is my husband's mashed potatoes. I'm going to move the utensils out of the way, and I am going to move the stock pot half full of my husband's mashed potatoes that he made me before stream. Isn't that yummy looking? Now, you can pipe these on if you want, or you can choose to be a little more rustic and just spoon them on. If you were going to try to make this to impress somebody, say your husband for the first time you cook for him, or your in-laws or company, doing something with a piping bag or something like that is a nice choice, but not necessary. So I am going to refluff his potatoes because they have been sitting here in the pan for the last hour. And I will now take his mashed potatoes and yeah, the mashed potatoes are made with milk, butter, and mayonnaise in there. And the mayonnaise works as an additional fat source, and it actually lightens up the texture of the potatoes. And you want to have a nice layer of potatoes down here, but it doesn't have to be tons. You don't want to have it be, half filled with potatoes. You just want to have a nice serving of potatoes over the top, having it so that you can still see some of the gravy through. When you put it in the oven, the mashed potatoes will get a little golden and the gravy will bubble up in between, and that's just so yummy. I'm making my mouth water with the smell of this in the room with me, and knowing I get to eat this. It is, like I said, a very comforting, filling, homey recipe. And I will put it up onto Discord after stream. And so anybody that wants to can join my Discord. You can find that on my channel page. It pops up occasionally here in my chat. All of my past streams that are no longer up on uh, Twitch are now on YouTube, and you can find them on Cooking with Hedgepigs at YouTube. So there is also a link to that on my homepage. Alrighty. And prolific as I have been with all of this filling, it is now right up to the rim. So you need to be careful if you do what I did and make sure that you put a cookie sheet under this, because it may very well bubble up right over the top and over the sides, and that's just a mess you don't want to have in your oven. It's much better if it stays in the pan. Okay, so here we have the mashed potatoes over the top of this, and just for being pretty, I'm going to add a very light dusting of parsley to the top. And then my husband is going to poke it in the oven for, you probably want to use the tray. What? Oh, you'll want to poke it in the oven, and you can get the thing down there, and I'll put it on it so you can have an easier time carrying it. And it is heavy. Okay, so now we've got 15 minutes to wait for that to become tasty and browned and ready to eat. And I, meanwhile, am going to take some of the leftover mashed potatoes and I'm going to add them to a bowl. So I add a couple scoops of these fluffy mashed potatoes to the bowl here. Something I like to do with these mashed potatoes is mix in some soft tofu, which is goes by the name brand Tofutti, and it says better than cream cheese, and it's a soft, it's basically an extra soft tofu, and you add it in here, and when my stomach's really 15 minutes, honey. You mix it in and it adds the protein to the mashed potatoes. And now I'm going to take some of my gravy that's left over. And I am going to pour this over the potatoes. And then I'm going to show you how lovely and pretty this is. Nice bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, and as you can see the herbs in here, and they go throughout the gravy. I'm going to make that a bit of a prettier picture. And my dog is crying in the background because he can smell all this and it's torture. So I'm going to take a nice picture of my mashed potatoes and gravy and try to keep my fingers out of it. And I am going to add a whisper more salt to the top because I kind of like salty gravy. And I am going to add a little bit more pepper because I like pepper in my mashed potatoes. So, and then I'm going to take my spoon and take a nice scoop here and show you the steaming mashed potatoes. That's lovely. The mashed potatoes um, with the mayonnaise in it are actually very soft and fluffy, though they look very solid. They actually aren't. They're nice and fluffy. And these were just made with a potato masher, not with a ricer. And um, you can taste all the seasonings in the gravy. It's a nice beefy flavor. And you can taste the sage and the rosemary. And makes a lovely side dish. All right. So in the future, I will be making, I have not made my spaghetti for you yet, and that will be coming up. I will be making, by request, my lasagna. How much mayo for this? This was about 8 potatoes, and these are good sized potatoes about this big, and that's probably a good 6-inch potato. My hands are not small. I have about a 9-inch finger spread from edge to edge. I would have been a good pianist if I had decided to go that way. So we've got some nice big baking potatoes, and it used a stick of butter, about half a cup of milk, and between a third and half a cup of mayonnaise. And you add that in gradually because it doesn't always need it. The one thing anybody who's watching this needs to know, and I'm pretty sure y'all know, but I'm going to say it anyway. You can mash your potatoes with a fork. You can mash it with a potato masher. You can mash it by putting it through a ricer, which basically extrudes the potatoes in little thin things. Do not ever use a blender on them. Don't put them in a blender. Don't use an immersion blender on them. If you do that, what you will have is watery potatoes. It just blends the living tar out of them, and you might as well have soup. So, despite any kind of thought that that's a good idea, do not use a blender. You can use a hand mixer, which is has like little blades on it in a cone shape, and it's like what you would use for making a pie, uh, um, a filling for a pie, or meringue, or blending up cookie dough, for instance. But do not ever use a blender. You will regret it. I may make at the same time I make lasagna. I may make manicotti, which is a long tube that you stuff with various delectable things. And in my case, that is meat and cheese and a sauce, and they are probably 5 or 6 inches long and a couple inches wide by the time you get done with them. Yeah, Andrew uses a hand masher too, Mav. And then you put it in a baking dish and you cover it with more sauce, and then you cover it with more cheese, and then you poke it in the oven, and they're wonderful. You can have cheese manicotti, or manicotti with, I like my chicken and mushroom filling with a sour cream mushroom sauce, and you use a mixture of Colby Jack and um, mozzarella cheese for that, and that's really wonderful. It's actually my favorite kind of lasagna if I use those same fillings and make it out of lasagna. Um, I will probably be showing people pasta carbonara. I will not be using angel hair pasta because I'm not allowed to touch it. Um, my first meal I ever cooked for my husband, I made seafood pasta carbonara, and it had shrimp and smoked salmon in it. It had pancetta. It had baby spinach, and that was all based in a carbonara sauce on angel hair pasta. And the box said it served 6 to 8 people. 6 to 8. I didn't know that meant sumo wrestlers. It actually, when we cooked that, it completely filled one of those really big salad bowls, heaped. And my husband was there, my oldest brother and his wife, my nephew was there, obviously I was there, and I had one serving, my sister-in-law had about one and a half, Andrew and the boys had somewhere between 2 to 3 servings each, and even eating that much of it, we got it only down to the top level of that uh, giant salad bowl that my sister-in-law brought back from Mexico. And it was then transferred into 2-gallon baggies. So I probably made somewhere upwards of 3 gallons of pasta carbonara with seafood. And it was a lovely recipe. But it is a long-running joke that the angel hair pasta tried to take over the Tri-Cities, and it's still somewhere out there glowing because of the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, and um, it's an absolutely amazing recipe, and I will be showing that one eventually, but not with angel hair pasta. And uh, I will probably be doing fettuccine alfredo as the chicken and mushroom. And so I've got a whole Italian food lineup. I've already gone through a large portion of Chinese, and I'm hitting English recipes and Americana. And I will be working my way into Mexican foods as well, and some Thai dishes. Uh, so in the culinary aspect, I will be wandering all over the world and showing you how to do things. I've already shown you how to do um, egg rolls. Some very good things coming, Mav, yes, and uh, some of my best recipes, honestly. And There'll be more sandwiches. I'll probably make a few salads. I'll be featuring a lot of soups. I love making soups, stews, and chowders, so I will be making several different kinds there, including some that are, seafood chowders, oyster. Um, I don't know. I have never cooked them, and they cook with a lot of garlic, so it's one of those things I'm not sure if I can actually get a good recipe of. I'd have to be looking up online and testing them. But maybe, um, if you have a special dish that you want to see me cook, I can try to hunt down a recipe for it, and we'll give it a go and see how that goes. And I'm going to be trying to make some dumplings at some point down the line, and I will be making some stuffed pasta and pasta from scratch. And uh, the cheese tortellini that I had early on, um, I'll be making that. It's basically just a homemade pasta that you cut out in a circle and you put the filling in it, and this was 5 different cheeses, and then you just pinch the edges like it's an empanada or a half of a taco, and then you take and you bring the 2 pointed ends around and seal them. And that's the tortellini shape. Ah, beef adobo. I'll look it up. I know that they sell the adobo chilies and sauce, as long as that doesn't come with garlic in it, and it's not very hot, because nobody in this family eats hot food. I used to, I don't anymore, and obviously I have the issues with garlic, so if their adobo sauce comes with garlic in it, that may be something that I have to try to make myself, which may or may not work out right. So we'll see. But yeah, if you have requests like that, you can always put them in my Discord, which would mean, Maverick, that you actually have to join a Discord. No faking. I can't promise you that, honey. You know I have already had faking online here when I made the Cobb salad sandwiches and the chef salad sandwiches that had turkey bacon. But I will do my best to um, meet any requests that you have that are reasonable. In the future, we're looking at adding in some stream games that you can play with points from the channel, just to kind of amuse yourselves. I may add in some trivia games that we do, try to get you all engaged and increase some of your food knowledge, and may have prizes to go with that. We'll see how good my stream gets going. And when we reach 200 followers, we will have a special episode and celebrate all that with you all. We're getting there, slowly but surely, so that's a good thing. How much longer do we have on the pie? Yeah, I'm kind of finished babbling as much as I can come up with things to babble about. Now you get the hard part, honey. You have to come up with a dish for me to put this in. Alright, so we have got a little bit of a golden top on this now. We've also got some of the gravy slopping over the sides. And it has got just slightly browned little peaks here. could get it a little bit more brown than this if you wanted to, but it's pretty perfect as it is. Um, I'm going to try to get the gravy to go back inside. And if you can believe it, when I made the tortellini or the chicken tetrazzini last week, I had 2 trays this size. That was exciting. Very tasty too. Those were some good leftovers. And although I didn't make it with any milk in it, it normally has a cream sauce incorporated in it. The chicken gravy that I used the next day combined with the starches from the spaghetti, and it actually had a very creamy flavor to it. So I have got a nice bowl here, and I am going to carefully scoop some of this up and put it in the bowl here, trying to keep it as pretty as possible. It would have been easier on a plate, but a bowl is probably easier to eat it from. And as I said, at its heart, this dish is stew with mashed potatoes on top. I am going to raid the potatoes here and make sure it's got some nice pretty potato on top. And some visible bits on the side. And then I'm going to clean it up for pictures. I wouldn't worry about slopped gravy or anything like that if I wasn't trying to make pictures that make this look attractive. But here is the finished plated up version. As you can see it, doesn't that just look yummy? Do you have a fork or something like that, honey? Okay. I will set this off to the side and get a picture of it for my stream. Try to keep my hands out of view. Quit poking me with the fork, honey. I am not done. Okay, now here we go, where I will give Andrew the plate and the fork, and he can show you a nice little forkful of it up there on camera. And he will type and tell you what it tastes like. Thank you all for coming. My next stream, I'm going to try to cut in another stream before Saturday, but Saturday is the next scheduled stream. And airdrop. Hi, Professor. Welcome in. I hope you've been lurking this whole time and have seen it. As you can see, I'm going to hold this up here and show you guys a close-up. Oh, that's going to be heavy. Here's a nice close-up of it. And that's a big tray of food. Lurking during D&D. Hey, that works for me. Can we get a shout out, honey, for Professor Niels? Thank you so much for the donation, Lily. I appreciate that so much. Um, let's see. We have got Shwedi is streaming. I'm going to see what he is cooking. Oh, it's food videos. Don't want to watch that. Um, I don't see any live chefs I know other than the AFK Kitchen on, and we just rated them. I am gonna pull through to what my general viewers are, and that is the Long Dark community. And we are going to go and raid Babaginator. He is a Long Dark streamer, and he is also an author and a editor and just a wonderful guy. And so we will be going and rating him in a few minutes. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you get a chance to eat some of this and give it a good try, and I know you'll enjoy it. Um, Thank you all so much for coming. I hope to see you Saturday or possibly a little bit before that if I can get another stream in there. Uh, Thank you for your donations, for your subs, for your follows, and for your time in watching me.